Hello, my name's Annalisa Gordon, and I'm delighted to be able to share a recording of a presentation that I gave at the BERA conference in September this year. I'm Professor of Education at St Mary's University in Twickenham and have been particularly interested in how we manage bereavement, grief, death, loss in the school setting now for a number of years. And this presentation shares one particular aspect of my research. One of the things that startled me, I think being startled is always a really good place to start for some kind of research, but it was a fact here from the Child Bereavement UK report in 2018 that really struck me. How one child is bereaved of a parent every 22 minutes. But then also that so many teachers, the majority of teachers, receive no training on coping with death at all. I read this at the start of the pandemic. And as you can imagine, St Mary's University is a large teacher training provider working with 600 or so partnership schools across London and the South East. And of course, many of our partnership schools were closely affected by death and bereavement at this time. Indeed, one of our partnership schools, I know the head teacher told me that 19 of their pupils had lost a parent, a direct parent or carer in the early months of the pandemic. So I suppose this led to a passion, if that's the right word, for bereavement awareness training, particularly in initial teacher education, although also beyond for sure. So during the 2 years, which were very pandemic affected, 2020 to 2022, in collaboration with the charity Child Bereavement UK, we offered optional bereavement awareness training for all of our trainee teachers. And during this 2-year period, there were about 385 trainee teachers, I think, took up that optional offer of additional CPD. Feedback from the sessions was wonderful from those students. They clearly found it useful as they prepared to embark on their careers as early career teachers. And the feedback from that really encouraged me to apply for a small grant award from BERA. So that was last year. The Learning for All title there, really. The report, the research is done. The report is written and published on the website. A blog is due to come out from BERA very soon now. And you'll be able to read more about this research there. The idea about Learning for All really struck me, though, because it was the theme. Obviously, if we can support children and young people at a challenging time where perhaps they're experiencing loss or grief, bereavement in some way, then we stand more chance of supporting them in their broader academic learning and their continuing development. But also we're supporting the learning for new teachers as well, was really what I was interested in. It's quite a challenge, learning to be a new teacher, so many different plates to spin and juggle, but somehow very personal issues, emotional issues can be the trigger for some other reactions in teachers. And I really felt called that we needed some further training on bereavement awareness for all of our new teachers as they enter into the profession. This final report makes recommendations at the end, which have implications for practice, of course, for policy within school and more broadly, and also for future research endeavours. And I'll share a little bit more about that a bit later on. So there's this dual focus on exploring the impact of bereavement and grief on learning for all the children and young people in our schools, but also the teachers and other adults in schools who are working with them. The research questions were fairly straightforward. The research design was obviously determined as a result of these questions, and an invitation really to trainee teachers, primary and secondary, all of them. We offer undergraduate and PGCE primary training at St Mary's, and we offer PGCE secondary across a range of subjects. So an invitation went out to all of the trainee teachers on those programmes, again, to participate in optional online training sessions with Child Bereavement UK again, and to complete an evaluation at the end of the session, which had been adapted from the normal Child Bereavement UK CPD questionnaire to also include elements for my research project. 167 trainee teachers participated this year in that training, and 113 of them completed the questionnaire, providing some really very rich data for analysis about how they felt bereavement awareness training enhanced their professional learning as on a training course, but how they thought it in turn might support the learning of children and young people in their care. I also had a subsidiary group of questions there, which were really looking more at whole school policy around this. And there was a very short, only had 2 questions, open-ended questionnaire sent to a random selection of senior leaders in some of our partnership schools. There was a low level of response. I know senior leaders in schools are extraordinarily busy, and I chose not to chase or cajole in any way. But the 5 responses I did receive were detailed and gave also some very insightful comments about important themes related to bereavement training more broadly for teachers in schools, and whether they felt that bereavement awareness training should be included in initial teacher education provision. Maybe just a quick pause to look at some of the literature on the field. There's so much literature in some ways, but in other ways, not very much that looks longitudinally, and that is an area for future development. There are certainly aspects here about where loss and grief in children seems to have an impact on learning, including Avril Noor and Hollins's article, which is looking particularly at the impact on GCSE grades, for example, within secondary schools and so on. I think we could anticipate that, but nonetheless, it's useful to have research that's really trying to explore that. The most significant impact in less affluent areas was, again, perhaps not surprising, but the literature has been interesting to read, particularly in the context of the one partnership school I already mentioned at the outset, where in those very early months of the pandemic, 19 teenagers experienced the loss of a parent. The reason for that high number was probably for this reason, that the school is in a disadvantaged part of London. Many of those carers and parents are working in the health service or in care sector, and clearly were perhaps more exposed to COVID-19 in those early areas. And of course, that leads to the knock-on effect. So again, that has implications for us for training, for school policy in certain areas. Low confidence of teachers is highlighted in a few reports. Again, perhaps not surprising. We have one colleague at St Mary's who had participated, new to us, working in our initial teacher education team, who attended the optional training alongside the trainee teachers, and said that in his 20 plus years in the profession, he'd never had any training in schools on bereavement awareness. So again, perhaps not surprising, but useful to see nonetheless. And then I was quite drawn to a group of articles, a few of them are cited here, where really talking about how schools' approach should be proactive. Lucia in particular, looking at the context in Denmark, in Danish schools, and how every school is required to have a bereavement policy, but how that needs to be something organic. It's constantly in need of updating as teachers change, situations change, and so on. But they are nonetheless very useful background journal articles. The timing of my research was, it was helpful that it also coincided, I didn't know this at the time, but it coincided with the publication in November last year of the UK Commission on Bereavement's report, where bereavement is everyone's business. And as you would expect, there's a section within their report. It's a very wide-ranging report, but a section that relates to schools and to education in particular. And they recommend that all schools should have a bereavement policy, including obviously training for teachers and a process for supporting a bereaved child in the short term, but also the medium and the longer term. And I think as we see a child, perhaps at primary school level, we'll hear from one later, a child bereaved at primary school, and the way that bereavement lives with them in different forms through secondary school and even into university and beyond is important. So there are clearly some useful links here to literature, which I was able to draw on. My initial plan, before I look at some of the questionnaire findings, the initial plan had been to follow up after the questionnaires with the trainee teachers and the senior school leaders and have 2 focus group discussions. as is ever the case, we have ambitious aims when we set to do research, and then the reality hits in. But I was particularly keen in this area not to add unnecessarily to the workload of people who'd kindly agreed to participate in my research. So rather than following up the questionnaires with separate focus groups, I pulled together what I call a sort of expert focus group. So it included the two colleagues from Child Bereavement UK who had facilitated the training sessions, both of them actually formerly teachers themselves. One of our undergraduate primary trainee teachers, we'll hear from her later. She took part in the sessions, but also had a very keen lived experience, I suppose, of bereavement, which she was happy to share. I also included, alongside my own experience, a senior IT colleague from primary. I'm a secondary teacher by background, just wanting to keep that balance, but in particular a colleague who is working very closely with the partnership team about school placements and so on. And then, of course, we had also the director of our wonderfully named research centre at St Mary's, The Art of Dying Well. So this focus group, and a sort of expert focus group, was able to look at the findings from the questionnaires and see the feedback from the senior leaders to inform next steps. So some of the themes that came out, these are the findings from the research, a very strong theme around the importance of high quality bereavement awareness training. You can just see some of the quotations there from some of the students. They were particularly, they were universally positive. 98% of participants said that they felt more confident after the session. And the trainee teachers liked the interactive nature of the session. The experts from Child Bereavement UK are very used to running online sessions with polls and quizzes and resources, videos, all kinds of things in there, but also underpinned by references to literature, which is so important within our initial teacher education programme. So links to literature and theory, as well as the practical dimension. The quotations there you can see. The questioning side of bereavement was particularly a strong theme. It revolved around the use of language when we talk to young people, especially maybe younger children, about death and loss, and the importance of trying to normalise conversations about death, not shirking away from it, not hiding from it. But really that balance between theory and practice was what the students particularly liked. Now, one finding from this research could have been that we could have some kind of cascade model. This is what I was thinking, maybe, if the trainee teachers welcomed it, perhaps an organisation like Child Bereavement UK, there are obviously many other bereavement charities as well, but could perhaps offer training to ITE colleagues who could then in turn deliver the bereavement awareness training. But what really struck me we offered our trainee teachers a choice of 4 sessions. They were optional, so they could opt into any. I was present in all of them. So although I was in sessions in the previous 2 years, the lead up to this project, yes, I could run the session now, but I don't have the depth of experience and knowledge that those experts from Child Bereavement UK have. The fact it's an external organisation as well, on something that is an emotional issue for some of our trainee teachers, came out loud and clear as something that the trainee teachers really welcomed, especially when there's something that's potentially sensitive, challenging for them. Having said that, I think it is important for a member of the trainee teachers' normal team, the pastoral team, the academic tutor team, to be present. From St Mary's, it was either me or a member of our professional studies team who would always be in the session, able to follow up some of the discussions afterwards with the trainee teachers as needed. So the importance of the high quality expert bereavement and awareness training. Then also there was a theme emerging around professional learning, and this was interesting in itself. We asked them about this was optional at this point. We're actually moving it to have it embedded, compulsory, core for all trainee teachers for academic year 23-24. But I wanted to find out from them what their motivation was for participating in the session. And this ranged really quite widely, but there was a certain amount of fear and anxiety, lack of confidence among the trainee teachers, thinking, oh my gosh, this is being offered to me. I've never even thought about bereavement awareness training. I think I'd better go to the session. So a certain amount of that as well. But also a genuine desire to be ready to support children and young people in a challenging moment. That real heart moment of the teacher came out, that motivation that probably brought some of them into teaching in the first place. I think it's also of note that several of the participants had experienced bereavement themselves during their school years and saw the value of the training for that reason, partly because they wanted to manage the situation when they're a teacher in school, but also they wanted to protect themselves from potential triggers that could happen in a school environment. So that was really very important. In terms of the professional learning as well, though, the trainees all responded about the importance of this being really more than a one-off training session. Yes, it's a 1.5 hour training session online, which in fact, I'll just mention now in case I forget, will be available for all initial teacher education providers to sign up for via Child Bereavement UK's website any moment now. But the idea that the trainees were also followed up with an email which included a huge amount of additional resources, stories and links and videos that the trainee teachers can peruse at their leisure, or that they at least know is there as a resource base if ever they're needing to manage and support children in this way. Obviously, an initial teacher education programme, it's initial. It can't cover absolutely everything. So this bereavement awareness training, I was seeing very much as the first step on perhaps a broader understanding about managing death, grief and loss in the school environment. There was a strong support, as you can see, that the training session should be compulsory. It was equally considered that way by the senior school leaders, and that's one of the reasons now we're moving to make it core for all of our trainee teachers. There were also quite a bit of discussion around the theoretical, conceptual aspect of it versus the practical. Some of the trainee teachers really liked understanding about all stages of grief and how it looks in the research literature. Others were much more focused on just give me some practical strategies I can do. But I think that blurring, one informing the other and vice versa, is just so important as part of initial teacher education. So the whole theme of professional learning came out very strongly, the importance of it. And then, of course, there was the wider school context. This quotation was from one of the senior leaders that responded to the questionnaire. There was quite a contrast of responses. One school in particular had a very well-established bereavement policy, a flowchart with what to do in a particular need. But they were also very honest that policy arose from a very sad situation in their school with the death of a pupil in unfortunate circumstances, which triggered them realising that they needed to have a much better support mechanism in place. All of the school leaders responded saying that bereavement awareness training as part of ITE was compulsory, would be sensible, and in fact commented that they would review their own professional development in school to see whether they could have either a refresher or an introduction for all teachers in amongst it. Key things that emerged from the senior leaders about policy. Remember, I mentioned about the UK Commission on Bereavement, having a process in place, who are the best people to support. It may not be the form tutor, it might be a subject teacher in a secondary school that the child particularly gets on well with. It could be a learning support assistant, but then of course they also need to have the right appropriate training. So that ongoing training is crucial. Access to resources and wider reading. There's no shortage of resources and materials to help us. Any of these bereavement awareness support charities have got lots and lots of resources, but of course we haven't got time to read them at the moment. We immediately need access to them. So time spent researching those in advance are important. And then the notion that sharing is caring. The more we can do to support young people there is going to be absolutely key. Sharing, normalising, as I said, conversations about death. Recommendations from the report, just in brief. Compulsory, yes. Expert facilitators, yes, but supported also by the ITE programme team. I think there is scope, much needed scope indeed, for international research to share learning in this area. Culturally, countries operate in different ways, schools operate in different ways, and there's so much we can learn from one another. And I think also active engagement with key stakeholders is needed. This was one university's initial teacher education programme working with one charity, but there are so many different stakeholders within this. And so to that end, I'm going to be organising a symposium, probably early summer, 2024 at St Mary's University. And if anybody viewing this video would like to either attend or be involved as a contributor, please do let me know. Grief does matter. It affects learning for all of us. I'm now going to just conclude with a short video. I'm hoping it will work, with the title, Just Say Something. You'll see the significance of it in a moment.
I'm Paige. I'm a third-year finalist primary education student at St Mary's University, and I'm really looking forward to starting my first teaching role in September. So I lost my dad when I was in year 6, which left me a bereaved child, very lonely, very isolated, and unable to cope due to the lack of training. So the school gave extra help with my SATs, revision lessons. I was taken out of class when I felt I needed to, and removed from any activities to do with either deaf or parental guidance, like Father's Day and things like that. I feel like the school tried so hard to offer a sense of normality that it became so uncomfortable that everyone trod on eggshells, and I stuck out like a sore thumb because it didn't want to be spoke about. I felt it was important to participate in these sessions to make sure I could offer the support that I didn't receive as a child, especially following COVID, that a lot more children are now bereaved in life. I think the biggest thing I took from the training session is it doesn't matter what you say, but say something to start those conversations, for a child to know it's okay for it to be sad, and it's okay to be a normal situation. I think the schools need to raise the conversation. They need to start the talk of feelings. They need to talk about the process of life and the process of death, and how children can become familiar with those feelings and accepting them, because a child will not start that conversation without an open. Yes, I believe that bereavement training should be mandatory across the whole education system, as we're teaching kids how to get through life, to cope, and how to educate in every areas of their being. Why are we not educating in bereavement as well? I was very apprehensive because I felt it opens a box that's been closed for many, many years that I've never had to talk about. I've never had to express how I felt and what happened, because I learned to get on with life and not deal with it. And I feel like it's helped me deal with it and move on from that part of life. Yeah, so I used bereavement training, and specifically the support that teachers can provide to bereaved children, as my dissertation and my research project through my final year. And this I look forward to take on and research more in a master's and join the pastoral teams in the schools. I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give as a trainee teacher, as a bereaved child, is to say something. It doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter why, just say something, acknowledge it, don't let it go unnoticed.
So some very heartfelt messages there from Paige, a student teacher with lived experience of bereavement. Just say something. Please do engage with the issues. Please do be in touch if I can be of any assistance, or whether we can work and collaborate together. This is something that's so important for learning for everybody. The final slides here include some of the references that I've mentioned in the process, but please do be in touch if you'd like to be involved more. Thank you for listening.